The Boys, Volume 12, The Bloody Doors Off. Written by Garth Ennis, art by Russ, Braun, and Darick Robertson with Richard P. Clark. This is covering issues 66 to 72. Alright, the series finale, the final volume, the conclusion of The Boys. Before I dive into the story, I just want to say thank you to everyone who found my channel and is subscribed and likes my videos and is here to watch every week. Before my video on Volume 1 of The Boys, I only had about 500 subscribers, and I was making videos every week for like 100 or 200 viewers. So now, with the reaction of The Boys and the growth of my channel, it's been really crazy to me. And I've been really ecstatic about the growth, and I'm very happy to keep going and to bring everyone more comic videos. So thank you, everyone. My next series I'm going to dive into is Invincible by Robert Kirkman. Really fun superhero story. I think a lot of you will dig it. It's going to be a TV show on Amazon Prime Video next year. So yeah, it's going to be some really cool stuff in there. So let's dive into the final volume of The Boys. There's a lot of sadness in this volume. There's going to be some character deaths, so be prepared for that. But I think it was a good conclusion, and I'm pretty happy with it. So let's dive into it. Issue 66, The Bloody Doors Off, Part 1. So before we jump into this volume, you gotta remember how last volume ended with Butcher saying to Becky after he just killed Black Noir, he said, "You would have hated what I've done with my life, and what I'm gonna do next, you'd hate that most of all." So it was very kind of ominous. You don't know what Butcher's plans are, and when this volume picks up, Butcher's doing some things in the beginning that don't really make sense. You don't understand why and his motivations for doing them, but it all makes sense as the story goes on. So we pick up, and in the aftermath of last volume, a few months have passed, maybe almost a year. It is now winter. The issue opens in some sort of snowy factory or warehouse, and we jump right into some action. Butcher is fighting Vass, aka Love Sausage. For some reason, he's fighting his old friend. It is not explained yet why. Vass says to Billy, "I cannot let you do this," and then Butcher shoots him with a bazooka, killing him. Now we jump over to Hughie walking in the snow. We hear some news broadcast explaining what's going on since the aftermath of last volume. Nancy Pelosi is now President of the United States. She is not running for re-election though. Her administration was purely a transitional one from the Vic the Veep sort of administration to hers. The world now knows whole bunch of everything going on, so they know what Compound V is, how rampant its use was, how unstable it was, how these superpower results are random and sometimes lead to people having to be euthanized if their powers don't materialize properly. Von American is being scrutinized heavily. There is a congressional inquiry into them. Now Hughie, he arrives at the Boys HQ, and Butcher is not there at the moment. Hughie tells the group that he thinks it is time to disband. Mother's Milk says that they were thinking the same thing actually. Mother's Milk says he still has to deal with his daughter stuff. Frenchie, who is sporting a Napoleon hat and still missing his arm, he has some PTSD, so his heart is not in the fighting anymore. And Frenchie says though that the female, she's actually been smiling and even giggling. After the revelation of Hughie's masturbation, she's laughing a lot, and Frenchie believes that this merriment might mean new hope for her, and he wants to have her explore this far from the violence of the boys. Now we see the female, she's even giggling to herself in the background. Hughie explains how Butcher had him kill A-Train, and how Butcher sort of led Hughie into doing it. And they are discussing what Butcher's motivations for this might be. Hughie says it was kind of weird because Butcher said that he did it to toughen him up, but then afterwards he didn't let Hughie do anything else. He didn't let Hughie help him with the battle with Homelander and Black Noir in the White House. So why did Butcher want to toughen him up if he wasn't going to bring Hughie along? So Mother's Milk says that maybe he figured he owed it to you, since A-Train is kind of why you got involved in the Boys in the first place. Regardless, they all agree it's time to go home. And Frenchie asks, so who's going to tell Butcher though? And none of them really want to have that conversation. Over at Vought headquarters, the Vought CEO, Brewster, he is giving some sort of speech in the boardroom saying that the federal government is unfairly coming after them and they are going to fight it. Afterwards, Stillwell and Jess Bradley say that Brewster's speech was not very strong and they criticize him for it. They have a talk about the fallout of the Battle of Washington and everything, and Stillwell says that we will say we knew nothing of the Homelander's plans. We will also say that we never saw those Homelander pictures, and they will just calmly claim that they never knew. And the two of them together sort of brainstorm a plan that they will tell Congress. Back at the boys' HQ, Butcher returns, and before the rest of them confront Butcher about quitting or disbanding, Butcher actually announces a 3-month hiatus, saying that things have quieted down, and he also says that Hughie will be promoted to the new number 2 when they all come back. And he makes sure to note that Hughie asked for and wanted this to be number 2. Hughie, honestly, he completely forgot about him asking for this back when they were at Doc Peculiar's, but Frenchie Female and Mother's Milk kind of resent Hughie being the new number 2, specifically because he sought out the promotion and asked for it. So they're a little bit upset at Hughie, and everything that Butcher does, though, he does for a reason. He purposely wanted to promote Hughie and stoke some resentment by the other team members of the boys. Anyway, they all leave for a 3-month break. Later on the street, Hughie's talking to Annie, and she is leaving him. She's had enough. She's packing her things in a taxi cab and says that she needs some space, go somewhere quiet for a while to sort out her thoughts. She's still having a hard time dealing with Hughie being part of some CIA hit squad, and she is tired of talking with him and feels like they are just going around in circles. And Annie says for Hughie to give her a call if he finally decides he can get over her past and decides that he really wants her and really means it. And she heads off in the cab out into the distance. Hughie, he goes back to his apartment and he receives a text from Love Sausage on his phone. Issue 67, The Bloody Doors Off, Part 2 of 6. Hughie goes to visit the Legend. Hughie says that the citizenship for him, Frenchie, Female, and Butcher has been revoked, and they have 90 days to get out of the country. Legend suspects that Susan Raynor is cleaning house when she is running for elected office, and she doesn't want to be tied back to the boys or have any of that coming up, so that's why she perhaps revoked their citizenship. Legend asks if Hughie heard the news about Vass, and Hughie says Vass texted him yesterday, but the text didn't make any sense. And Legend informs Hughie that Vass, Love Sausage, is dead. Someone cut him in half with a rocket launcher. Hughie shows the Legend the text that Love Sausage sent him yesterday, and the text says T34ATLENIN, so T34 at Lenin. The two of them cheers to Vass and remember him, and Hughie wonders why Vass would text him when he is so close to death. They were friendly, but they really only met twice. Anyway, Legend tells Hughie that he should go talk to Kessler. If Susan Raynor is causing him trouble and revoking their citizenship, he should sound Kessler out, see if he can figure an angle of attack on Susan Raynor. Now, before Hughie heads off, Legend thinks about that text, that T34 at Lenin. And Legend says that this T-34 is a kind of a tank, a commie model. And Vass, when he was in the army, he used to work with tanks, just like Greg Mallory did. So Legend says, I don't know what it means, but that part in the beginning, that means tank. So Hughie has a little bit of information, but he still doesn't know what that text means. Now we jump over to Mother's Milk, and he is having a heart-to-heart with his daughter, Janine. She is actually only 12 years old. The compound V in her system that passed down from Mother's Milk biologically to her made her age and go through puberty quicker. And Mother's Milk was rarely there for her growing up, always away, so she kind of turned to her mom. And she recognizes that this was a mistake though, because her mom was giving her drugs and got her into that porno and various other bad things. So Mother's Milk wants to know where Janine's mom is at, because he's very upset with her. But Janine is just angry at Mother's Milk, accusing him of pretending he doesn't know what happened. And Mother's Milk explains that he doesn't know what she's talking about. So Janine explains that Butcher showed up right after that porno video of her went viral. He showed up at the porn office that night, straight from the airport. It just so happened that Janine and her mom were there as well, discussing a potential sequel film. And Butcher, he murdered the porn producer and the bodyguard right in front of Janine. And Janine says the look on Butcher's face was one of disgust. And like we were some sort of giant inconvenience to him that he could just hardly be bothered to deal with. And then with no effort and no emotion, Butcher took Janine's mom and crushed her to death right in front of Janine, killing her. While Butcher was killing Janine's mom, he looked at Janine in the eyes and told her, "You leave that man alone," referring to Mother's Milk. Butcher wanted Janine to leave Mother's Milk alone. Damn, Butcher. Now we jump over to Hughie. He has Kessler on the phone, and Hughie is asking for help with Susan Raynor and their whole citizenship thing, but Kessler is brushing Hughie off, telling him, "Face it, little man, your exciting adventure with the tough guys is over. Time to return to obscurity. I'm hanging up now." And Hughie, angry at being so disrespected by Kessler, says to him, "Alright, monkey, you want to play it that way? Do you really think Susan Raynor is going to hand over the keys to you when she leaves? Do you think a guy who got screwed in the ass by a bulldog and ended up cleaning monkey spunk out of his ears is going to get her recommendation for head of the CIA? If I was you, I'd be thinking about who can help you, like if there was anyone who could deliver something to you to make you look like a star. See, the next time I phone you, sunshine, have good news for me and be ready to be more polite." And Hughie hangs up. And after this call, Hughie's thinking that he did a pretty good job working over Kessler, and he thinks to himself, "Did I just pull a Butcher?" Now we jump over to the Legend's bedroom. He is sitting in a bed with a picture of Queen Maeve, and he is remembering her fondly. All of a sudden, Butcher walks into the Legend's bedroom, and Butcher says, "You don't have a picture with Blarneycock? Would make a nice little family photo. If Doc Peculiar hadn't farmed him out to some kid's home in Paddyland." And then Legend stares confused at Butcher, and then he gets scared, and he goes to grab his gun in the nightstand. And Butcher stops him, and then Butcher says, "Hughie's been to see you already, ain't he? Bound to have. With Raynor and all that. What'd you tell him?" And Legend says, "I didn't say shit. I don't even know what you're up to." And Butcher replies, "Well, maybe he'll tell you something, and you'll put two and two together. Maybe he'll come down here and say, 'Vogelbaum,' and I can't have that." And Legend can't believe, after all this time, everything the two of them have been to together, that Butcher is going to kill him, and Butcher is confronting him right now. And Butcher replies, "Yeah, well, rather you than him. If Butcher had to kill someone, he'd rather kill the Legend rather than Hughie." So Legend, he goes to run away, but he trips over some boxes of comics and he falls. He continues to try and crawl away, and he eventually dies. Hard to say exactly what caused his death. I read one interpretation of this scene that says, Butcher kicked the Legend violently in the anus, which ended up killing him. The kick is not really shown, but it's implied by the fact that the comic on the floor in front of the Legend is called Shitfoot. I don't know if I buy that interpretation, but I read another interpretation of the scene that says the Legend was trying to escape, but he succumbs to a terror-induced heart attack instead and dies. Both kind of, I guess, makes sense. But anyway, either way, the Legend has died. Hughie is in his apartment, and he eventually figures out that Vass's cryptic text to him was actually an email address. And @ was supposed to be the @ symbol. Vass probably just forgot to write .com or whatever. So the email is T38@Lenin, and then Hughie, he tries to use the Russian website ending, so .ru. So Hughie, he ends up emailing that, and he ends up getting an automated response back. So Vass did send up a message for Hughie, just in case something happened to him. And the email to Hughie reads, "I am sorry for secret cryptic bullshit, but I did not want to believe this thing. I set up to reach you fast as possible if all was real. Click on link and you will see what I do not have the heart to type." Hughie then looks at the link, and it shocks him. Hughie then immediately tries to phone Mother's Milk. Issue 68, The Bloody Doors Off, Part 3. Hughie, with the help of Mother's Milk, called a meeting with Frenchie and the female. Frenchie still resents Hughie a bit for asking to be number 2 behind Butcher, but Hughie is trying to explain that Butcher purposely did that to sow division between them all. Hughie says he called them here because shit is serious. The Legend and Vass are dead, and Hughie thinks Butcher is responsible. Hughie explains about Vass's note and what it said. Basically, after the boys left Russia all the way back in Volume 2, Vass found out about the 150 dead supes in Little Nina's warehouse, all headless. If you remember that volume, it was a special version of Compound V that blows people's heads apart if you get the detonation frequency right. So Vass, he got suspicious and put the word out. Big reward for information. Eventually, someone contacted Vass saying that he was working for an English guy, which is Butcher, who bought what was left of Little Nina's stash, and then he started to refine more of it. The fella did the work for him there in Moscow, nice and quiet, no questions asked. And Voss, eventually he went to this guy's office and saw the paperwork to send 118 metric tons of this refined Compound V stuff to Florida. The guy said his employer, meaning Butcher, was on the way over again to finish up and pay up for the last installment. And Vass, he checked the guy's phone and realized that it was bugged. And Butcher, he probably heard this conversation that Vass was having with this guy right now, and Butcher would probably be coming to kill this guy as well as Vass to keep everything secret. So Vass, he knows what Butcher is up to. Just then, Hughie gets interrupted by a phone call from Kessler, and Kessler informs Hughie about how Butcher gave Susan Raynor information that she then gave to the Air Force to be able to home in on the neurons in the supes' brains, and in the Battle of Washington, they could be used to blast the supes out of the sky. And without that, the supes definitely would have won the Battle of Washington. It would have been a completely different ending. And Hughie, he thanks Kessler for that info. So Hughie continues on the story for the rest of the team, about Vass. And Vass has said in his note that he left a way to get a message to Hughie if needed. And then he tried to get himself and this Russian guy who was working with the Compound V to safety. Hughie says, though, that it was no use, though. The Russian news reported that Vass and this other fella died 3 days ago. And this Compound V stuff, it arrived in Florida 10 days ago. And Frenchie asks, so what do you think Butcher is planning? And Hughie says, well, Butcher, he already got his revenge on the Homelander and Black Noir. The only thing left is every other supe on the planet. Butcher even hinted at this in Volume 9, Issue 55. He was talking to Greg Mallory in the past, and then Butcher says, I'll tell you how you neutralize a potential threat. You killed a lot of them, every single asshole in tights. And then Mallory says, and how do you propose you commit this particular genocide? And Butcher says, well, you can't, can you? I'm talking about in an ideal world. And Mallory said, but you would if you could. And Butcher replies, bleeding right I would. No one should be allowed to walk around with what they've got. It's just too much of a risk. So even back in Volume 9, it was hinted that Butcher would like to kill all the supes if it was all possible, and maybe now he has figured out a way to do that. So they all kind of figure out what Butcher's plan might be, and then Frenchie says, this head-exploding Compound V stuff from Russia, I recall it being pretty unstable, and the subject has to ingest it in food or something. And Hughie says that he's been thinking about that as well. Butcher maybe wanted to turn that special Compound V into something else, a dirty bomb or a gas or something. You know, he has this CIA black budget at his disposal for years. Maybe he got a biochemist working for him, adapting it. Now Kessler, he told Hughie that the know-how the Air Force received to take out the supes could only have come from a skilled scientist specialist. So Mother's Milk says, so maybe Vogelbaum? And then Frenchie says, yeah, but Vogelbaum's dead, he committed suicide. And then Hughie tells the story that Mallory told him about how Mallory sent Butcher inside this cabin in Vogelbaum's place to kill him. And then when Butcher came out, he supposedly spit out Vogelbaum's throat or something with his teeth. But then Mallory actually never saw Butcher do the killing firsthand. So maybe Butcher was lying to Mallory, and Vogelbaum is actually alive this whole time, secretly working on Compound V stuff for Butcher, behind Mallory and everyone else's back. So Frenchie says, so if this is true, if Butcher is weaponizing Compound V with Vogelbaum's help, what are we gonna do? And then Hughie replies, kind of unsure, we'll talk to him, like. And then Mother's Milk and Frenchie look at each other, kind of realizing that talking to Butcher is not really an option that would go well if Butcher has this whole kind of plan. Now the female, she nervously raises her hand, and then Frenchie looks at her and asks if she's alright. And she shakes her head. She really doesn't want to potentially have to go and fight Butcher. And Hughie says to her, what if he sets something off or whatever? An awful lot of folk might end up dead. Just think about everyone who's been affected with Compound V over the years, or has it in their veins and doesn't even know. You've got to be talking millions of men, women, and kids that might die here. And then Frenchie says, the female, she's made such progress lately. Causes no pain or hurt to anyone since that whole Team Titanic stuff. Perhaps in light of whom we face, we ask too much to suck her back into this. And Mother's Milk says, shit, if anyone deserves a chance to walk away, it's her. And Hughie agrees, and he says to the female, no bother, we're gonna have a hamburger or something and talk about this by ourselves. You stay here and watch a bit of TV. They say bye to her, and they don't want to drag her into this whole Butcher confrontation. She's been to enough. So they go to head out, but all of a sudden, the female, she speaks for the very first time in the series and says, I hate mean people. And she grabs her coat and heads out with them. She is going to help them stop Butcher. She really seems like she is on the path to being a normal human being. We jump over to Jess Bradley, and she shows up on Capitol Hill to testify. She walks by an angry mob outside that is yelling at her and saying that she and Vaughn are responsible for the death of their loved ones. And, it is not a nice walk for her. She gets inside, and Stillwell is there. And he tells her, oh, you should have came in a more discreet back way. You didn't have to go in front of the whole crowd there. Anyway, they both go inside to testify. After some time has passed, Mother's Milk is alone back at the boys' HQ. And he is investigating into some of that Butcher stuff. He's talking to Hughie on the phone, and he eventually hangs up when all of a sudden Butcher shows up in headquarters. He asks Mother's Milk, why ain't you in LA sorting out your kid? And the two tensely talk about Janine. And Butcher also asks about, why did Mother's Milk send Hughie to talk to Greg Mallory all that while ago? And eventually Mother's Milk says that he sent Hughie to Mallory because he felt Hughie deserved to know stuff straight from the source, especially after Butcher pulled that alchemical thing with Hughie. Mother's Milk then says, so you're really doing this, huh? Meaning he's gonna go through with this whole soup genocide plan of his. And then Butcher says, I really am. To tell you the truth, I thought I was gonna die in the White House. Take a couple chunks out of the Homelander so that the lads could finish him off. But since I'm still alive, I suppose I'm gonna have to go through with this plan, aren't I? And Mother's Milk replies, so where do you think that leaves us? And then Butcher says, well, if you want, you can still walk away. Mother's Milk goes to attack Butcher, and Butcher goes flying into the wall. Butcher says, I did have one idea. I was gonna kill your mom, make sure you ran out of your magic potion. Too late now. And then Mother's Milk says, how come you didn't? Because you looking for a fair fight? And then Butcher says, no, because it's your mom, you dozy twat. I wasn't gonna kill your mom. And Mother's Milk punches angrily. Butcher ducks and knees Mother's Milk in the groin, and then drives Mother's Milk's head into his knee. But he lands a clean punch on Butcher's head and stomach, yelling, why you gotta do this? Why you gotta be the way you are? Butcher, he falls back into this table. Mother's Milk yells, you think I wanted this shit? And then Butcher replies, you're the best mate a guy like me could hope for. I don't deserve to know you. Butcher, he then pulls out a grenade. He pulls the pin out of the grenade and shoves the grenade in Mother's Milk's face. It explodes, severely damaging Mother's Milk and Butcher's arm and hand in the process. And then Butcher says, "But I ain't got no mates." He then holds his other hand over Mother's Milk's mouth until Mother's Milk can no longer breathe and dies. Butcher then sits there beside the body. Damn, death of Mother's Milk. That hurts. Issue 69, The Bloody Doors Off, Part 4. So Stilla and Jess Bradley have shared a hotel room together, perhaps having sex, as Jess Bradley is naked here. Now Jess Bradley, she picks up the newspaper of the Washington Post, and she is upset to see herself on the cover, and she says to Stilla, "Jesus, I'm the face of it now." And she is kind of the one that the media is pitting a lot of the blame on and sort of painting as the face of this whole sort of controversy and scandal. Hughie is driving in a snowy landscape, and Frenchie phones him and informs him about the death of Mother's Milk. Hughie says maybe they should inform Kessler or Susan Rayner about Butcher's plans. Maybe they can help stop him. And Frenchie, he advises against this, saying that they're incompetent, and Susan Rayner, she'll probably make us fugitives and the police will come after us. She would do that to cover stuff up and not hurt her Senate run. And Hughie kind of agrees and says, "Shit, I guess it's gotta be us then that stops him." Frenchie then tells them that Kessler, however, he did reinstate their CIA security clearances though, so at least all that is in order now at least. Frenchie asks what Hughie has discovered, and Hughie explains that apparently Butcher, he hired truckers to drive the Compound V from Florida to various parts over the country and leave it in certain locations near various airfields, where eventually it was moved again from those airfields and flown somewhere else. So it's going to be really hard to track down that special weird Compound V that's out there in the world. Hughie then explains the long trail of evidence he followed that culminated in finding a house that Greg Mallory bought around the time Vogelbaum was kidnapped. It's in New Hampshire, and Hughie thinks that Vogelbaum could be there. And Hughie asks Frenchie, if it actually came to fighting Butcher, could we really handle him? And Frenchie says, well, the female in a fair fight face to face, possibly, but you would remove your arms and legs and reinsert them in the wrong sockets. So Frenchie does not think Hughie could handle Butcher in a fight. So they say goodbye. Now Hughie has arrived at this cabin he thinks Vogelbaum is at. Hughie pulls up and he goes inside, and dead on the floor he sees Vogelbaum there. So Vogelbaum is now dead, and just then, as Hughie enters his cabin and sees Vogelbaum, his cell phone goes off and it startles him, and Butcher is phoning him. And Hughie asks how Butcher can do this and how he could kill Mother's Milk after all this time, all of us together. And Butcher says that he has to finish the job and Mother's Milk tried to stop him. Butcher explains to Hughie his whole plan and the why and the how. Now Butcher, he didn't kill Vogelbaum all those years ago when he was with Greg Mallory. He faked Greg Mallory out. He actually spit out strawberry jam, so where Mallory assumed it was Vogelbaum's throat that Butcher bit and was spitting out, it was just strawberry jam, and Butcher finds it kind of funny that how wrong Mallory was about that. So Butcher, he made a deal with Vogelbaum back then. So when Butcher was sent to go kill Vogelbaum, he told Vogelbaum, you can stay alive and live in this house, same as before, but now you're working for me. And I want you to work on a way of sorting out the supes for good. Butcher also tells Hughie that he's too late. Vogelbaum's notes are gone now, and Butcher hired private pilots to fly those crates of Compound V all around, so Hughie has no chance of ever finding out where they were dropped off. And Butcher says he has IEDs hidden all over the world, and when he sets off the bombs or whatever, it will be a chain detonation. 40% atmospheric coverage in the first 4 hours, wind, currents, and food will take care of the rest, and it should be completely effective in 6 or 7 months, killing off all people with Compound V in their system. And Hughie says, are you out of your mind? You're making yourself into a bloody monster, you're mad. And Butcher says, I'm doing what has to be done. They're a stain on the world, a cancer. And Hughie argues back, no, they're not. They're just wankers. It's beyond evil, beyond description what you're doing. It's like the Nazis killing the Jews or whatever, wiping everyone out. And then Butcher says, it's more like the Jews killing the Nazis if you stop and think about it. They argue some more, and then Butcher says, Hughie's hopeless, and when someone gives you a weapon, son, you use it. Butcher then says to Hughie, alright, try this on for size. How do I know you're there? And Hughie's confused. I'm standing here talking to you, I'm not sure. And then Butcher continues, no, Hughie, how do I know you're there? And then it hits Hughie. How does Butcher know he's at Vogelbaum's place at this exact moment when he arrived? Is Butcher here with him now? Does Butcher have hidden cameras here or something? So Hughie is kind of freaking out a bit, and Butcher is kind of playing mind games with Hughie to sort of scare him. But Butcher was not there, and Hughie was fine. And Hughie arrived back in New York, and he's talking with Frenchie on the phone, and they're discussing all these revelations that Hughie has learned. And Hughie, he's picking up some takeout for Frenchie and the female, and then he's going to come back to the headquarters to meet them. Hughie also tells Frenchie about his phone call with Butcher and how he almost pissed himself when it seemed like Butcher was perhaps there. So they hang up, and Frenchie and the female, they're looking at some documents on the laptop, and Frenchie thinks back to his relationship with the female, and he questions to himself, let me help, I said, and smiled and gestured, and I helped you be a part of what we are, but did I really help? And then all of a sudden, he hears something. He hears like a ticking, and he goes over to where this cloth is thrown over a box. He lifts the cloth, and there is a bomb inside with 2 seconds left on the counter. And he looks at the female, and he says, I love you, from the first. And then, boom, their headquarters explodes. Both Frenchie and the female are dead. God damn it, Garth Ennis, why? Hughie, who is near the building, gets thrown back from the blast because he was just heading there. And he is stunned, and he is lying on the hood of a car. And he starts remembering various things that Butcher said to him over the last few years. And he comes to a horrible realization that he is supposed to stop Butcher. And it's all really up to him now. Issue 70, The Bloody Doors Off, Part 5. Hughie is still in shock as the paramedics evaluate him, and the police, they check Hughie's CIA credentials and they allow him to go. Hughie, he goes to visit Mother's Milk's mom. He goes over to her place and he has trouble finding her, eventually makes his way to the basement. And Mother's Milk's mom is in a terrible condition. She is basically like a gigantic tentacle blob at this point. And she wraps her nipples that are like tentacles around Hughie and says, my boy. And she's mistaking Hughie for her son. She is just so out of it right now. And she raises her tentacle to Hughie for him to suck it. And I guess Hughie does, because he sees no way out of here until he does so. And he says, never tell anyone, ever. Jess, Bradley, and Stillwell are in their hotel room and they're going over their game plan. And then Bradley says that Congress is going to want someone for this. We've gone too far. Hundreds dead, including the president, a battle in the sky, an execution on the White House lawn, supes turning out to be rabid demons, not messiahs in pretty costumes. Bradley says they should make a deal and we should give them a monster, a villain, something to publicly. And then Stillwell interrupts and says, no. We can't betray our corporation, company loyalty, the principle that stands before and above all others. Von American is the air we breathe. It gives us life. It's bigger than either of us. Separately or together, it gives our lives meaning. And if you think that is mere hyperbole, have you ever tried imagining life without it? We've given testimony. They haven't been able to shake us. They know no more than what we've decided they should. Legally, they cannot touch us. Now take my hand, take heart, it's going to be okay. So Stillwell, he's trying to calm Jess Bradley down here. Hughie arrives back in his apartment, and he decides that he needs to phone Kessler and get some help stopping Butcher, despite any potential negative consequences. I mean, without Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female, he can't do this on his own. And Kessler, when he's talking to Hughie on the phone, says, why is Butcher at the Empire State Building? And then Hughie's confused by this. And then Kessler says, Butcher, he flashed his credentials to get up there. Whenever any of you guys and the boys flash your CIA identification to law enforcement, a brief report goes into the system with where, when, and the explanation given. So I got a report that said Butcher 20 minutes ago showed up at the Empire State Building and ordered it evacuated all floors, everyone present, and he cited a possible terrorist attack. So Hughie's like, oh geez, what is Butcher planning? So Hughie, he just rushes over there immediately. He talks to the police at the bottom of the Empire State Building. They let him in. Hughie heads inside in the building after Butcher. It's deserted inside. Hughie rides the elevator to one of the top floors. Then he gets out and Butcher is there with a detonator in his hand. And Hughie says to him, I remember how much you love this place, so I thought you'd want one last look before blowing it up. And then Butcher says, there's no explosives in the building. I'm just here to set off the signal. And Hughie asks Butcher, am I meant to stop you? Is that it? Is that why I'm being left around? How in the name of God did you come up with that? And then Butcher says, I've been thinking about it for ages. Had half an idea someone ought to have a chance of sticking a spanner in the works. I mean, it ain't the sort of thing you do lightly, wiping out a good chunk of the human race. Butcher, he wanted to carry out his plan, but a part of him almost wanted Hughie or someone to stop him. And Hughie says, that's insane. And Butcher says, he's got the same feeling he always gets when he's really going for it, like I'm somewhere else watching it happen. And Hughie says that his plan is something a supervillain would come up with. Butcher, he congratulates Hughie on fighting dirty and getting up here and confronting him. Butcher, he then goads Hughie, saying, you're still scared of me, ain't ya? You never could look me in the eye for all that long. Still can't. Can you even say my name? And Hughie, he gets angry, and he works up the courage to try and stop Butcher, and he charges at Butcher blindly. But Butcher, he just simply steps out of the way, and Hughie jumps right through the glass out the window. And he would potentially die, but Butcher, without thinking, instinctually, Butcher, he grabs Hughie and has a hold of him, as Hughie dangles from Butcher's hand. And Butcher, he's kind of like holding a piece of glass to steady himself, and he's holding Hughie. And Hughie, he's frantically apologizing. And Butcher laughs, saying, after everything that's happened, you're saying sorry to me? Issue 71, The Bloody Doors Off, Part 6 of 6. So the glass Butcher was using to steady himself while holding Hughie, it broke. And in the gap between issue 70 and 71, off panel, both Hughie and Butcher have fallen to a lower platform on the Empire State Building. Butcher, he lies slumped against a wall with a broken neck. So I guess from the fall, he managed to break his neck and he is now unable to move. But he's still alive. And Hughie, he is caught on some sort of spiked railing with one of the spikes going right through one of his legs. So Hughie, he's stuck. And then Butcher tells Hughie that you gotta snap the bar you're on there. And then Hughie says, it will hurt. And Butcher says, it's gonna hurt way more if you don't. So Hughie, he snaps that bar thing. And then he falls to the lower platform beside Butcher. Butcher tells Hughie that he doesn't like the look of Hughie's leg injury and tells Hughie that he should try to tie a belt around it as quick as he can. Hughie does so, but he still feels that he can hardly move. And Hughie looks at his phone and it's broken. And the detonator has landed a few meters away from the both of them. Hughie, he starts crying and asking Butcher, how could you do it? Kill Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female? And then Butcher says, I never wanted it to end this way. I thought I got you all out of the way when I made that 3-month break for us. And I thought you'd all just die along with everyone else when I set off the Compound V bomb. And you guys would know nothing. And Hughie says, but it was them. You killed them. And then Butcher replies, yeah, I know. I killed my first man at 17, Hughie. Done a lot more since then. And every time I get that feeling I told you about, like I'm watching from somewhere else far away. It ain't like, I don't know, wrong, but it feels like a dream or something. And it's what lets me get the job done without worrying about it later. I don't know, it probably just means I'm sort of a psychopath or something. And Hughie asks if he was meant to stand up to Butcher and stop him from doing terrible things like Butcher's little brother did when they were young. Now, if you remember back in Volume 10, Butcher's younger brother, Lenny, stopped Butcher from killing their dad. And this is sort of the role that he wanted for Hughie in a way. So Butcher says, "Spot on. He was a decent bloke, same as you." Butcher admits to hiring Hughie for this purpose, sort of just a loose idea of someone that could maybe stop him one day if needed. And Butcher admits to setting up all these situations where Hughie could learn to toughen up, but it never worked. Hughie always, for the most part, stayed himself. Even when Hughie killed A-Train, Butcher could tell that Hughie hated doing it. So Butcher, he kind of gave up on the idea of Hughie ever stopping him. Hughie says, "I'm sitting here, talking away to you like nothing happened, and I just can't get it into my head that this is who you turned out to be." And Butcher replies, "Afraid so, my son. Then again, I was the one who put the boys back together after Mallory gave up. I made them what they were meant to be. I got Vogelbaum working on the soup-seeking missiles. The Homelander and his mates would have caused a lot more bother hadn't been for me. You need blokes like me, Hughie. It's what we get up to in our spare time that you gotta worry about." Hughie, exasperated, says, "Jesus, where are the cops? Are they ever gonna get up here?" Now we jump over to Jess Bradley, and she's alone right now, and James Stillwell is avoiding her calls. She can't get a hold of him. There is breaking news on TV. James Stillwell secretly contacted some congressmen and provided fresh evidence that completely throws Jess Bradley under the bus and blames everything on her. If you remember, earlier that year, he handed over direct operational control of the corporation's Superhuman Development Division to her. And Stillwell, he cautioned her to watch the various superhero teams, advising extra vigilance regarding the Seven and Homelander in particular. But Jess Bradley, she just ignored his advice and pursued her own agenda. So Jess Bradley, she then thinks back to her entire time with James Stillwell, and she realizes that from the very start, he may have brought her on his team to be his patsy if the time ever came. He promoted her, made her feel special, and on paper, she was in charge of the superhero division. And all this time, James Stillwell was sort of insulating himself and removing himself and moving her into the role that would sort of take the brunt of the publicity if things went wrong. So Jess Bradley realizes how James Stillwell has completely screwed her over, and she has a complete meltdown. She's ripping some of her hair out. Back over to Butcher and Hughie. Butcher tells Hughie that on his phone are the locations of the various bombs, as well as some incriminating info on Susan Raynor. And then Hughie asks, "You did all this for one woman, you're Becky, and not even for her memory." And then Butcher replies, "You didn't know her, Hughie. You don't know what she meant to me, what she made me into. Is there anything you wouldn't do for Blondie?" And then Hughie is shocked. He didn't think Butcher knew that he was still seeing Annie. And Hughie says how great she is. And Butcher says, "Glad to hear it. You love her?" And Hughie says, "I do. I really do. But I might have messed things up with her." And then Butcher replies, "Well then, you're a knobhead, ain't ya? Grab a hold of her, wrap your arms around her, breathe her in, feel her strength inside your own, and never let her go." All of a sudden, an NYPD helicopter flashes its light on the roof, and then Butcher says to Hughie, "SWAT and paramedics are going to be up here soon. You're going to have to kill me." And Butcher continues, "My neck is broken. I can't feel anything. They'll put me away for life, and I don't care about doing prison time. It's not that, but not trapped in my own useless carcass of a body, unable to move. I can't do that." And Hughie, he refuses to kill Butcher, and he says that Butcher deserves it, to live the rest of his life that way. Now Butcher, in order to convince Hughie to kill him, he says that he gruesomely killed Hughie's parents, and he provides all sorts of details that only someone would know if they were there themselves. And he says to Hughie, look at me, you know I done it." And then Hughie, in anger, thinking that Butcher killed his parents, grabs the metal spike piece of railing and he stabs Butcher in the heart with it, killing Butcher. And Butcher says, before he dies, he smiles and he says, "Nice one, mate." And then he dies. Hughie grabs Butcher's phone and he phones his parents' house, but Butcher was just lying to anger up Hughie enough to kill him. Hughie's parents are both alive and fine, and his mom tells Hughie that Butcher visited them last year, actually, and he was very nice to them, and he seemed very fond of Hughie. And they showed him around a bit, and they referred to Butcher as an awfully nice man. And the issue ends with Hughie kneeling in a pool of blood beside Butcher's peaceful-looking dead body. Issue 72, You Found Me. This is the final issue ever. So 6 months later since the Empire State Building, Hughie is on the roof of his apartment with his hamster Jamie, sitting in a chair looking up in the sky. He sees some other supes flying overhead, and Hughie says, "Ah, you load of wankers, you're never gonna know how close you came to it." Then we jump over to the Brooklyn Bridge, and it has finished being rebuilt from the aftermath of 9/11, and Hughie goes to see it. Hughie sees a plaque being put up on one part of the bridge, and the cement is still wet. And with his fingers, he writes the initials MMF+F, standing for Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female. Hughie, he has a meeting on a park bench with James Stillwell, and Hughie tells Stillwell that he can continue with this superhero stuff, but once again, never try to get supes into the military. And Hughie tells Stillwell about Butcher's special Compound V bombs that could wipe out everyone with Compound V in the world. And Hughie doesn't want to use it. He has no interest in genocide, but if Vought tries to get supes into the military, he'll use it. So he has that hanging over Stillwell. So Stillwell can never really ever pursue that plan anymore. He also tells Stillwell that he wants Vought to rebuild the Flatiron building, which got blown up, which is where the boys' HQ is. And James Stillwell says, that wasn't even us that did that, but Hughie's like, you're going to rebuild it anyway. And Hughie asks Stillwell, who was very emotionless through all this still, and Hughie asks him, who are you? And Stillwell replies, I am an expression of the corporation. I am the voice that says, you're right, sue us. That never gets upset. And then Hughie says, and you think you've won? And Stillwell replies, do you think you have? We always win. We're a registered trademark. You could snap my neck right at this moment and we'd still win. Or will you change your mind and commit an atrocity to prevent us from turning a profit? So Stillwell, he is basically the embodiment of the corporation personified in a man. He is uncaring, unemotional. He just thinks about profit and the corporation's best interest. Hughie asks Stillwell, you'll never sell supes to the US military, with or without what I have hanging over you. So what will you do? And Stillwell just says, why, something else. Now we jump over to Susan Rayner, and she is campaigning for Senate. But over the speakers, while her speech is going on, there is audio to a sex tape between her and Butcher, and her speaking dirty talk and yelling obscenities. And she starts freaking out, and then a plane flies by with a banner reading, Susan Rayner is a whore. And we see that Hughie's talking with Kessler on the phone. And Kessler was the one who released the Susan Rayner audio tape embarrassing her and ruining her Senate chances. And he did this because Susan didn't confirm his promotion to CIA director. So Hughie thanks Kessler for setting him up with a US passport, and they sort of wish each other well. Over at Vought headquarters, Stillwell is being introduced to a new superhero team by his executives, and this new team is called True, and they are all dressed in white. Stillwell is not impressed and says, that one has an erection, that one is suffering from withdrawal syndromes, and that one is plainly the Deep, which is hilarious. The Deep, the final surviving member of the Seven. He still has his underwater mask thing on, and now he is wearing this white hood over top his costume, which kind of looks like he's in the KKK. It's pretty funny. So the other executives say, yes, well, we did experiments with various forms of behavioral inhibitor, but the results are not good. And Stillwell tells them that they're going to have to start again. And then the other executives are saying, start again? With what? And Stillwell says, something that isn't just the same old shit dressed up. And the other executives say, and where exactly do you propose to find that? They're never going to change, you know. They're always going to have exactly the same set of problems, these supes. So Stillwell, he leaves, and then alone in the other room, he looks outside the window, and he is defeated. He admits to himself that his company has a bad product. And that's the last we see of James Stillwell. He is a businessman in a company with a bad product, and he is not happy with his slot in life now. Jump back over to Hughie and Annie, and they are together. They are walking by the Brooklyn Bridge. Hughie professes his love for Annie, and they decide that initially they had their park as sort of their special meeting place, but now they could have maybe the Brooklyn Bridge as their new place and a new sort of symbol for their relationship. And Hughie and Annie, they swing each other around, and they're both incredibly happy and in love, and they kiss. And then the title of the issue below reads, "You Found Me," and that is how the series ends. So that is it, everyone. That is the ending of The Boys. What did everybody think of that ending? I thought it was really sad and upsetting to have the death of the legend, Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female. That was upsetting and sad, and I was so pissed when Frenchie and the female got exploded. That sucked, man. But I really thought it was interesting that Butcher ended up sort of being the main villain in the end that had to be stopped. And what made Butcher so compelling as that villain is that he's the hero in his own story. He thinks he's doing the right thing, getting rid of everyone with Compound V in the world and all these superheroes. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but even though he's sort of committing genocide in a way. And whenever the villain thinks they're the good guy, that makes a compelling villain. So I love that sort of twist. But, you know, it was really hard to see Butcher killing all of his friends. Now, to have Hughie sort of take Butcher down and to sort of have that conversation between the two of them, that was really great stuff. And the fact that Butcher sort of wanted Hughie in place in the first place to sort of play his like little brother role and maybe one day stop him from doing something that is maybe going too far was really compelling and interesting. And I thought it was really good writing, so I was really pleased with that. I like the ending that Susan Rayner ends up getting screwed over. And I thought the James Stillwell ending for him was really good as well. Now, Homelander could have killed James Stillwell, and that could have been the ending. But in many ways, this is a worse ending for James Stillwell. He is still the corporate guy at Vought American, but he is a defeated man. And he knows that they have a bad product. He is the businessman that has to sell this bad product, and he hates it, and it sucks for him. And he's sad about that. And that's honestly a good ending and a shitty ending for James Stillwell. So I thought that was good. And we also get Hughie and Annie being happily ever after and going off into the sunset together with their relationship. So that is sort of the glimmer of hope that you end this story on. And I thought that was a good ending. So yeah, I highly enjoyed The Boys. What a fun series. When we were back in Volume 1 and Volume 2 and 3 and 4, and you had all that craziness going on, and it was really just kind of about exploiting like sexual storylines and making, you know, gross out stuff and being really funny in that way. But as you got further into the series, it really escalated into something more serious and more introspective. And I thought it was a great series throughout. So yeah, The Boys was awesome, man. I'm going to give Volume 12 a 9 out of 10. Really great. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you all be here for my future videos.